Hello, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your board game doctor today. In this video, I'm going to review Emberleaf. This is from the same design team as Isle of Cats, and this game really intrigued me for its theme and mechanisms. But as a quick overview, you are Emberlings trying to reclaim their land after being vanquished and pushed out by some enemy armies, essentially. And you're doing various things to rebuild your home and your land by doing contract fulfillment. You're doing a little bit of area majority deck building as well, and doing a card dancing tableau management experience, all of which to gain victory points. Now, talking about some of the mechanisms, first, the card dancing mechanism, as they have described it, or in other words, it's more of a kind of card programming mechanism where you slide cards on your tableau. You play cards, and a lot of cards have a one time use ability on them, usually at the top part of it, to say gain a benefit or convert something, etc. But on your turn, you either get to play a card from your hand or slide all of your cards over to the left in a programmed order, activating their walking abilities as they go along. Other cards give you some ongoing abilities, and some even offer some abilities as they leave your board. So the crux of this game revolves around creating this tableau of these character cards, these animals, and arranging them in a way that they can not only activate certain abilities as they are placed on the board, but also as they move off of it. You have asymmetric decks of six cards, I believe. Everyone starts with six asymmetric decks of these animals, and you can acquire more throughout the game and kind of create a little bit more asymmetry and combo potential with the cards that you are playing. You do have a lot of opportunities for favors as you can acquire them throughout the game. You don't start with any, but they are offered in a market of cards that give you sort of some end game objectives to try to pursue. The deck is larger than the hero card deck that you acquire more cards to add to your hand. And so there are a lot of different things that you can, or a lot of different ways that you can acquire goals to try to achieve throughout your game. In this game, I do want to highlight, in addition to like area majority, you're building out onto a board and trying to kind of create little neighborhoods with your own figures to gain some more points by the end of the game. And aside from a lot of other smaller rules, you also have a lot of positive interaction in this game. For example, as someone flies past certain areas on the victory point track, they offer an ability or a one-time event that everyone can participate in. Usually, it's getting resources or putting a figure on the board or something like that. And I should also say, a lot of these cards that you play from your hand offer an ability that everyone can take. Like everyone can gather this resource or everyone can attack. And so there's a lot of positive ways that certain actions benefit others. And then finally, the solo mode in particular offers a deck of cards that is called Your Sister, or the Sister deck, and it's a pretty straightforward. Flip this card, do these actions. Not a lot of overhead when it comes to running this AI. You do, or this bot, or what have you, this solo opponent. You do have different ways that they score points based off of their own personal favor cards. It's actually geared more towards what you try to accomplish in this game. So they get points, more points, if you do certain things or do better in certain ways throughout the game. And it also is of benefit to them if you build certain types of buildings more often than others. It's variable on which types of buildings will benefit more and give them more points, but it's all based off of what you do. And so it kind of creates nothing. It's more so like limitations for you or cautions for you to pursue certain avenues of strategy in this game, versus like something that they are just automatically getting points for. But otherwise, it's probably easier to show than to explain, but it's pretty straightforward once you kind of understand how they get those points and how it scores. And then flipping over the cards and doing what they say is pretty straightforward as well. For some game comparisons, the two games that really stood out to me in my own personal experience would be games like Wingspan and Ancient Knowledge. You have Ancient Knowledge, which uses a card programming tableau management system where over time, those cards that you play to your tableau will be pushed off. And so that's a constant thing that's flowing over time. A lot of recent games have utilized this mechanism. Ancient Knowledge was the first that I've seen personally that kind of focused on this mechanism. And so I really enjoyed it in that game, and it is present in this game, and it was a part of the reason why I thought this game looked interesting to play. You have Wingspan, which was a more static tableau building system where you activate certain cards in a row, very similar in both Ancient Knowledge and Emberleaf, rather than having them move to activate and off your tableau. Wingspan, you build them onto your tableau and activate them using certain turns. And so you can chain combos and build an engine, as it were, with that game. And complexity wise, I would say Emberleaf falls somewhere like in the Wingspan realm, maybe a little bit heavier with the rules overhead. But and there are other games that I think other people have mentioned as I looked through the comments to parse out what people thought about this game. That included games like Tapestry, Scythe, from Stonemeyer. You had Agricola, even Root, kind of for the asymmetry that you start with and the theme of like animals, right? Um, you have New Spirit, I think, is what the one mechanically similar game to Emberleaf in terms only in terms of the kind of combos that you're trying to create with drafting certain cards from the market in Newsford, as well as drafting elders to your board to give you certain more efficient or more nuanced actions. I just played Newsford recently, so it may be on my brain a little bit, but the kind of asymmetry to what actions you can take and the combinations that you create with the cards that you draft, I think mirror the most to Emberleaf from the Rosenberg collection. So take that as it were. Now, going through the peer review system, right, of basically just looking at the comments of those who have played Board Game Geek, those who have both positively and negatively rated this game. Starting with the pros, a lot of people really praise this game for its mechanisms, how unique it feels, but also blending a lot of more traditional elements and mechanisms in this game to make it feel cozy or reproachable, or approachable, I should say, but also feeling a little bit more unique, especially with like the card dancing system. Your turns are fairly quick and straightforward most of the time. I would say that it's easy enough to understand a game where it's either play a card or slide your cards and activate their abilities. Sometimes that can chain into a lot of cascading combos and rewards, which turn into other rewards. And so that can be very satisfying for a lot of folks. Some other people did not like that, so going into some of the negative aspects of this game, a couple of people mentioned the iconography issues that may or may not be minor or major to you in your experience with this game. Namely, for example, the you have the opportunity to attack certain groups of armies and factions that are like enemies, uh, kind of tying into that theme when we talked about it in the game overview. Sometimes the rules and the like favor cards will refer to these enemies or even the locations that you can travel from, like the neighborhoods and clearings that you can go to. They name them by name, but I don't see that name on the board itself. I see that in the um, I guess in the symbol that is portrayed in the card itself, which can be kind of small if you're across the table. You can't really, or sometimes you don't even really notice what that symbol is. I didn't notice it in my playthrough, and I should say that I played this in person, so I have an idea of like not being able to understand like where these favorite cards were uh, dealing with or mentioning of, and it wasn't until I looked closer and saw that they were talking about a certain location with the icon that was pretty small, right? And so there were some issues with that, and some other minor issues that other people had mentioned as well. The game to some felt repetitive, where despite the asymmetry with the cards that you get and the ability to draft heroes, a lot of people felt frustrated that they were only able to draft a maximum of four heroes to your hand for a total of, let's see, you start with six, so 10. Um, I think that some people felt like, I mean, there's so many different heroes in the game that you could potentially draft those, and there's no mention in the rules of like a starting draft with the starting cards and or the hero cards that you can acquire throughout the game. And so it didn't feel like there was a lot of opportunity to really explore some combos with those cards themselves. And some people also thought that the cards themselves weren't as didn't have a lot of pizzazz, right? They didn't have a lot of different things that they were doing that were kind of mind blowing, right? I mean, for the weight of this game, the complexity, I think it's solidly a mid-weight experience, and so I'm not expecting a lot of nuance. It reminds me of like the basics of Wingspan of the base game, rather than the more nuanced and complicated cards from the later expansions, right? And but in any case, a lot of people felt a little disparaged, thinking that this game would feel the same after a few plays, because there wasn't a lot of asymmetry, or at least there wasn't a lot of, I guess, asymmetry that you can build throughout the game. And kind of on the opposite coin, some people also had issues with how variable the favor cards were. I mean, it's a large deck with a lot of different conditions that you can meet, and depending on what cards are available and who drafts what, there could be the luck that you have a lot of different favors that combo well together and give you a lot of points at the end of the game. And sometimes you might not have that spread. In one solo play, for example, I did not have a great combination of favor cards to get me a lot of points at the game, and the solo bot was just taking off. And in the very next game that I played solo, it was the opposite, where I felt like a lot of the cards that I was drafting really made sense and they worked well together, and I was able to score much better. And so it becomes less of a strategic experience and more of a tactical slash luck of the draw kind of experience, with what you get in terms of favors, in terms of the heroes that you are able to draft as well. Sometimes the heroes are really cool and have abilities that work well with your deck. Sometimes they don't. And so some people thought that there was an exuberant amount of luck and variability, to the point where it kind of affected the strategy, the overall arching, strategy of this game. And some people felt like, despite the quickness of turns, some people, there's a lot of planning ahead sometimes in where you place your cards, in what order you place them onto your tableau, and therefore, not really knowing, not being able to plan ahead, a couple of turns, because of the ever shifting markets of hero cards and favor cards. It can lead to some analysis paralysis that maybe shouldn't be as divisive or um, as exuberant as it would be for a game this complex, right? It usually would be saved for a more complex game per se. So those were some of the negative things that people had to say about this game. Now, despite all of those negative aspects that a lot of people had, and I see where they're coming from as well, I suppose that I'm more inclined to talk about and review games that I had a positive experience with. And so my experience with Emberleaf was overall very positive, right? I didn't feel like there was a lot of rules overhead. I thought the rules were pretty straightforward. I think it really helps to watch someone play this game rather than just have it explained. I think seeing a couple of turns in action, especially with the card sliding and everything, really does help out. Play length, I think my experience was overly biased with like the solo mode, which is pretty straightforward. I also, I give that a 5 out of 5 as well. I thought the solo mode was really cool with how big the deck of cards is, and yet how easy it is to take turns. There is a lot of shuffling through the favor and hero cards. There is a mechanism where if you do take a card or banish a card with the solo mode from one of those markets, you automatically also banish or take out the last card in that market. And so you're essentially doubling or, adding an additional card that is taken off from the row. And so you can cycle things through things very quickly. And that is true with the multiplayer experience as well. Being it having a huge deck of cards, I think I prefer a system like Newsfeared actually, which is a much tighter and shorter experience where it does offer some additional cards that are revealed throughout the middle of the game, but it only happens a couple of times, like with the C deck only happening once, and then depending on the player count, the A and B decks that are added to the game as well. So it's in this game, it does cycle through a lot of those cards faster, which may be to address the issues that some people had with the lack of opportunities that favor you due to the luck of the variability of cards that are offered. And so being able to cycle through those faster could potentially give you those cards that you need to make your strategy work and therefore make this game more strategically viable. But all of that to say, I mean, that's a very nuanced thing that would come through many repeated plays. But, with the couple of plays that I had under my belt, I felt like it played, relatively well and at the appropriate play time, which is about 2 hours or so. Less so for solo, of course. But yes, I do give it a 3 out of 5 for strategy because of that luck element for what favors and other abilities, hero cards, etc., come out to allow you to, create a strategy to go off of in the long term. But the turn by turn decisions are really interesting to know what cards to place, where to place them. You have a lot of, amazing opportunities to say, okay, I need like 2 wood. I could play this card here, but if I don't have that card, maybe I can attack here and hopefully be along the track to the victory track when you attack opponents to gain resources that way. Or maybe someone else will trigger a positive interaction and give me some resources, right? Which is also very similar to Wingspan in that regard. I forgot to mention, but I really like those turn by turn decisions, and I think that adds to how the unique and traditional mechanisms blend in this game, which I give it a 5 out of 5 for. Lots of variability, especially if you consider the expansion that is added. I did have access to it. It has a couple of other asymmetric decks that you can start with, additional ways to make the trophies and the um, benefits that you get throughout the victory point track. That can be very variable as well. Some more favors as well. So yeah, definitely 5 out of 5 for that. And in terms of building your asymmetric deck further throughout the game by customizing what end goals you have as well as what heroes you add to your deck, that's an experience that I quite enjoy. More so than like having all of that asymmetry be upfront, like in a game of Age of Innovation, which I really enjoy as well. A much heavier experience, but everything is decided. I mean, and even Agricola as well, right? The asymmetry is decided before the game even starts with a draft in that case, which I would love to see in Emberleaf as well. I think if that ability was implemented for a more advanced experience, I think that would be amazing. But all that to say, for the complexity of this game, it was very fun. 4 out of 5 for me. The positive interaction as well as the racing, towards building more buildings in certain clearings to create neighborhoods for some extra points, racing towards favor cards, and heroes as well. Create and the race to become as efficient as possible with your tableau, creates a really fun puzzle that I and the types of interactions that I expect from a more Eurocentral or Euro style type of game experience. And so I don't think that this game is like one that would require a lot of repetitive plays to really become good at, just because there is so much variability in heroes and favors that I feel like it's more of a tactical reactive type of experience than strategic. But I think you can get really good at this game as you, for example, start to understand those individual decks that you can play with. I feel like some of them focus on like gathering stone and using stone in different ways, or uh, like the A deck, for example, that I had pictured here, had a lot of cards that involved movement. And so in that game, for example, I had this deck which allowed me to move across the board, and I drafted a favor card which allowed me to get a lot of points for having at least one building in each clearing. There were six of them. So I was able to really synthesize that deck well with that favor. And that was a very opportune experience, right? And that's positive. But then I can understand if someone does not have that experience where everything is kind of grinding together negatively, where you don't have a lot of favors that benefit you or heroes that are available for you to draft, that could lead to a less enjoyable experience, right? And so I can totally see that. But for me, it meshes a lot of things that I have come to enjoy in Euros. It's a midweight Euro that I think is quite enjoyable, and I would love to play again and really experience, like, especially with the multiplayer experience that more, to see how much mastery this game could offer, with repeated plays. So overall, 8.3 out of 10. Really enjoyed my experience with Emberleaf. So let me know what you think about this game down in the comments below. Thank you for watching or listening to this review of Emberleaf, and hope you schedule an appointment with me real soon. Take care.